Okay. All right. Good morning. I know everybody's super busy today, but as I do every election cycle, I like to do a Zoom meeting where we talk about why the heck do we elected judges in our state? Because we have so many people, especially coming into Washoe and Clark County, and they suddenly realize we elect judges, and I get emails and voice messages are like, why do you elect judges? We didn't do it in my home state where I came from. And that's where people start to realize every state does things a little differently. We have the ability to do that. But there is a good reason why we elect judges. And we can debate back and forth on, is it the best system? Is there ways to tweak it? What other states do? But for this election cycle, this is the way we do it. And it's really incumbent upon voters to feel empowered to talk to the judicial candidates. And unlike other candidates, I think people get a little hesitant because they're like, I'm not an attorney and I don't know what the language is. And no, the candidates want to speak to you. They're eager to speak to you. And we have a candidate on today. And so this will be nice for her to be able to kind of like talk about her experience. And Lori might end up being like member of the public guinea pig, where we can have some like conversations and do some role playing. Before we do that though, I'm going to do a quick PowerPoint and we will review why it is that we elect judges in the state of Nevada. And again, it is actually a good reason why. So let me do start here. Okay, very short history of why we elect judges in the state of Nevada. Again, this is Vote Nevada. I'm Dr. Sondra Cosgrove. I'm a history professor at the College of Southern Nevada and executive director of Vote Nevada. And the whole mission of Vote Nevada is just civics education, just making sure that people feel empowered to engage in electoral processes and governing processes. Okay, so let's talk about our English roots when it comes to the judiciary. So if you look at the colonial period, especially in about the 50 years before the American War for Independence, it became very obvious that the king was appointing the judges and then the judges were doing what the king wanted. And so there's a lot of complaints from the colonists, especially in the Boston area, that they just did not think that the judges were going to be fair to them. They didn't feel like justice was ever going to come down on their side. And so when you look at the writings coming from, like John Adams or John Hancock or any of the founders who were in Boston, when they talk about justice, they're usually saying justice is being denied to us. There's justice for the king. The king can go to the judges and tell them how to rule, but no one else gets to be covered under that kind of umbrella of justice. So the people in general in the colonies did not trust the judiciary. They did not think the judiciary was ever going to be on their side. They saw it as being openly hostile to them. And so they were looking for other sorts of justice. They were looking to Parliament. They were looking to themselves. They were looking to people in other countries. So during the colonial period, the colonists are going to view the courts as being hostile to them. Obviously, the colonists were not saints. They were breaking laws and they were, breaking the rules and doing things, coloring outside the lines. But they didn't feel like they were getting judges that treated them fairly. They always felt like the judges were very unsympathetic to them and that they did not rule in the favor of the colonists, even when they were following the laws and the rules. And this becomes especially acute after the Boston Tea Party, when Parliament passes what's called the Coercive Acts. And that's coercive is not a warm and fuzzy word. I mean, literally, they're telling the colonists, we're going to coerce you. And one of the things that happens under the Coercive Acts is the Vice Admiralty Courts. So military tribunals became the standard for if you caught one of the colonists smuggling or doing anything that the king didn't like, you did not go to a regular court that had a jury. You went to a military tribunal, and that military judge was your judge and your jury and your executioner. And so this is especially going to poison the colonists when it comes to the judiciary. When they're thinking they're going to be pulled into a military tribunal, and capital punishment may be what results out of that trial. So this is all going to have an impact on the writing of the federal constitution. So when you look at the federal constitution, in many ways, it replicates the British system of government. And so you're going to have this kind of separation of powers. So you've got kind of three branches: executive, legislative, judiciary. But the founders are going to put unique checks on those powers so that the executive, legislative, and judiciary has checks that they're going to use against each other. And then by empowering more people to vote, the voters are going to have a check on them. The judiciary is where you're going to see a deviation. And so within the British system of government, everybody assumed the judiciary was literally under the executive, that the king was going to control the judiciary. The founders of this country wanted the judiciary to be as independent as possible so that people would trust it, so that justice would be something people could expect from it. And they're going to say, judges should be at the federal level, judges should be appointed by elected, or when you're looking at the Senate, it was actually selected by state legislators at this point, that those folks should be the ones that are picking the judges. So the people will elect or select someone to be in the federal government, and then that person serves as our proxy and picks the judges. And so they thought, okay, there's kind of voting that goes into this. The people are having a say. That should help fix the judiciary. The problem we're going to run into is political parties. Political parties are never mentioned in the US Constitution at the federal level. The founders actually reject political parties. They think they're a corrupting influence. They thought the new American nation was way too diverse for political parties to ever form. And then who founds the first two political parties? The founders. So this is where you get the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, the Northern leadership and the Southern leadership. So they're right out of the gate form these two political parties. And this is where you're going to get a monkey wrench thrown in, that now all of a sudden it's not just elected leaders who are picking the judges, it's the people who represent the interests of a political party. And so this is where you're going to get a problem within the judiciary in our system. And so you don't really see the appointment process as seeming independent, as being, just the will of the voters. Now it becomes a political appointment. So during the 1800s, this gets worse and worse, where the parties are picking the judges behind closed doors. And so judges are, again, often seen as being very corrupted by politics and being very influenced by money. And this really is going to reach a nadir. I mean, this is where you get the lowest opinion of the court, is the 1857 ruling in Dred Scott v. Sanford, where a unanimous court basically rules for all the slaveholders in saying no Black person can ever be a citizen, and Congress has no authority to regulate slavery. This is one of the reasons we end up with the Civil War, is the American public said we can no longer trust the judiciary. There's no way for us to litigate our way out of a problem because the judiciary has been corrupted. So public confidence disappears in the judicial system. And this is one thing that puts us on a very short path to having a civil war. After the Civil War, and we go into the Gilded Age, it doesn't get any better because now judges appear to have a very pro-business bias. So this is where you start seeing a lot of money flooding into the judiciary. So the legal system was thought to be not only corrupted by political appointment, but now also corrupted by money. So campaign contributions, people start to see that as equaling bribes. And so this problem that we've had with money in politics is we've had for a very long time. And it's this feeling that we all have that money kind of corrupts the process. At the end of the Gilded Age, when we go into the progressive movement and the progressive reforms start to take shape, one of the things the progressives tried to do was take power away from the political parties and give that power to the people. Enfranchise more people to vote. This is why they support the 19th Amendment and giving women the right to vote. Give the voters more power and let the voters check the corruption. Empower the people to actually say, we're putting our foot down, we're going to take this corruption out. This is where electing judges became very popular. Take it away from the political parties, try to take it away from the money interests, and actually just have the people be able to interact with the judicial candidates and say, I think this is a fair person, I'm going to vote for you. So that you have this symbiotic relationship between the judges and the people, and not judges and the political process. And so there was this idea in the reform era, this is about 100 years ago, that voting was a way to stamp out corruption. And so they're also going to be the group that says we should have ballot questions and we should have referenda. Get the voters more involved because the voters will stand up and stamp out corruption. Now, we can now argue back and forth whether that actually happened, but I think we all still kind of believe this. Enfranchise more citizens to vote, and then the citizens will hold people accountable who are running for office. Use elections to fight corruption. And I think at heart, we all ascribe to this. We all want this to be true. Unfortunately, powers that be will use voter suppression tactics to try and stop voters from using elections or ballot questions to fight against corruption. And so one way you can look at voter suppression as being an attack on the anti-corruption effect of voting. And this can take a whole lot of forms. When we talk about voter suppression, usually we're talking about it within kind of that civil rights framework, but it's also a reaction against this idea that if you have really empowered and enfranchised voters, that they're going to push back against political corruption. And so there is a tendency for the political parties to push back against that by blocking voting or limiting the effects of voting. And then we go back and forth about campaign contributions. It's worse now. After Citizens United, the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that now has become dark money and super PACs, we still have that corrupting influence or not sure what to do about it. So when we're looking at solutions, we need to ask ourselves, is electing judges getting what we want? Do we feel like voters can, use the power of the vote to make sure we have a good judiciary? We would have to ask those questions. Do we have a problem? The problem I see is that voters just don't feel empowered enough or comfortable enough to really evaluate potential judges. And so to me, it's incumbent upon, community college professor to say, hey, let me help you be empowered. Do we have enough civics education? Do people come out of our K-12 system really feeling like they understand the judiciary? That's a problem too. We don't have enough civics education. And then we have the, 800-pound gorilla in all of our discussions about politics and corruption is, what are we going to do about all the money? In most states that have elections, you have to have over $1 million in the bank to run for a state Supreme Court position. I mean, that's a lot of money, which could equal or at least give the impression of corruption. So right now, what I want to focus on is the role of voters and the role of candidates to make sure we're overcoming the limited civics education, to make sure voters feel like they can be engaged and do their research. But this is where I start to reach out to judicial candidates and say, I need your help. I need you to help me facilitate that civics education. That when you're talking to candidates, really explain what the court you're running for does and why we elect judges and how you can help them be more, feel more comfortable in casting that vote for a judge. Because if we still believe in that progressive reform, that get the voters involved and they'll help to get you really good candidates and get you really good judges, voters really need to be able to participate in that. And so voters, need to know you can research the courts, you can research candidates more now than at ever time because of the internet, but also get out there and meet the candidates. Lots of candidates are showing up on Zooms. They want to talk to you. Now, that we're not on pandemic lockdown. They're at in-person events. Go on Facebook. You're going to see them all over the place. Just show up. They want to talk to you. When you talk to them, sometimes people say, I don't know what to ask. What's the question I ask? Or they'll say this to me. Well, I asked that judicial candidate how they would rule in, and they'll say a gun rights case or an abortion case. And they told me they couldn't tell me. That seems really shady. Why couldn't they tell me? And I'll say, no, actually, if they told you, you shouldn't vote for that person because that's unethical. They have to be impartial. They need to go into court and hear the evidence in each case before there's any type of ruling or before they do jury instructions. You can ask them what's their judicial philosophy, because they can tell you that. They can tell you what their education is. They can tell you which court they're going to run for and why it would be a good candidate for that court. You can ask them, well, why are you qualified? How many cases have you had? And then you should ask them, well, what are you going to do after you're elected? Will I still see you? Is there a way for me to keep track, on what you're doing? But then candidates, this is where I could use help. Please don't use jargon. Try to just use plain language, because sometimes when a voter is talking to you and you kind of slip into the jargon you're used to using with other lawyers, it can be intimidating. Definitely tell voters which court you're running for. They don't know the difference between a justice of the peace and a district court judge and a family court judge, and why you picked that court. Why you said that's the court, that's the seat I want to take, and that's the court I want to be in. Tell voters, I can't tell you how I would rule, and here's why. Tell them that you're running as a nonpartisan. That's why there's not a D or an R, and why we do that. It kind of explain the rules of how a court hearing runs, or the court that you're going to be in. What would a typical case look from beginning to end? And then, tell them after I get elected, I'm still going to be doing the Boys and Girls Club, or I'm still going to be doing, going to schools and helping with civics education. And so you can still show up and talk to me and be able to see what I'm doing. And so if we really feel that electing judges is the right way to go, and maybe we do want to tinker with it a little bit, but that's what we want to do, because we still believe voters really are the ones that can help us make sure we get good judges. We're just going to have to invest a little bit more to help voters so that they feel empowered, and then have candidates. I'm going to say to candidates, I need you to help me to make sure that voters don't drop off when they get to your name on the ballot. All right, so now I'm going to do a stop share. Oh, and Anna came in, so now I have 2 judicial candidates. So Jessica, does that kind of help explain why we got to where we are?
Yeah, it does. And all of those things, I mean, obviously I remember throughout my years of schooling. And I am asked that question a lot of, why do we elect judges? And so I've always answered it from my personal stance of, there's definitely problems with the appointment process and corruption and political connections and backroom deals and all of that. I'm not sure that straight elections like we do it is the way to go, but it is what it is at this point. And so I agree with everything that you said, that it's our job as candidates to get out there and meet the voters. And I will reiterate what you said. We want to talk to you. 100%. We want to talk to you. So the other thing you mentioned, showing up in person, shoot us an email, give us a call. You will be able to find most of the candidates' information on their website. And I can't speak for other candidates, but I can speak to you. If I receive an email from a person asking me, why am I qualified? I am more than happy to take that call, answer that email, because that's my job. I'm asking to be elected to a public service job. That public service doesn't start when I get elected. It starts right now. And I want to earn the vote.
Well, and then with Anna, I know she gives out her cell number and just says, shoot me a text if you need to, if you can't find me. But when people are like, well, where are they? I'm like, I see them everywhere. Everywhere I go, there's judicial candidates waiting to talk to people. Just go to events, you'll find them.
Absolutely. And again, just reach out, email, text, call, anything. Shoot us. Almost all of us are on social media. Find us on there and say, hey, I'd love an opportunity to meet with you. Happy to tell you where I'm going to be at, or let's just have a conversation over the phone, so you don't have to go out of your way. And we're in a kind of a smaller year. There's not as many judicial candidates up this year.
Yeah.
However, there's still so many on top of all of the other elections and things that you need to become educated about. It's overwhelming. And so anything that we can do as candidates to take that burden off of you, let us do that.
Right. And so, I mean, I usually say, if nothing else, just ask them which court are you running for? What's your education background, and why do you think you're a good fit for that court? Just with those 3 questions, you can have a very in-depth conversation with any of our judicial candidates.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So which court are you running for?
I am running for Las Vegas Justice Court, Department 6. So there's 2 different parts to that on the education background side of it. So Las Vegas Justice Court covers what we call the township of Las Vegas. And the easiest way to explain that is when you write your address, if it says Las Vegas in it, I'm on your ballot. There will be, I think, 5 or 6 other races, I don't remember the exact number, that will also in Justice Court. And you'll see all of the different departments. A lot of people think that the department numbers are like assembly districts or Senate districts, where you have to live in a certain part of town.
Right.
The department numbers for our court system means nothing for for which ballots we will be on. That's just the court's internal way of assigning cases. So you'll see there's Department 6, there's Department 7, Department 10, Department 13, all in the Justice Court. And so you'll see a whole bunch of candidates out. That doesn't mean we're all running against each other. We're all running in different departments, and we will all be on your ballot, and you'll be able to vote for one candidate in each of those races.
Right. So what's the jurisdiction of that court? What types of cases do you get?
So Justice Court overall it's our lower level court. A lot of people call it the People's Court. If you are likely to come into contact with an elected official, it's probably going to be your Justice Court judge. Right. So Justice Court handles all of the traffic tickets. Muni Court does some, and Henderson and Norristown also have their own justice court. So all of the traffic tickets in Las Vegas, but also handles first appearances on all criminal matters. So whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, it starts in justice court. Felonies will get bound up to our district court, and Anna's here and she'll talk to you about the district court race because that's what she's doing. Misdemeanors will continue to be dealt with entirely at the justice court level. So all of the criminal starts in justice court. The civil departments of justice court deals with what most people think of as small claims. So people suing other people for money up to $15,000. So that includes, it also handles all of the evictions. So all the landlord tenant, all breaches of contract. So when somebody owes you money and they haven't paid, you have a dispute with your landlord about getting your security deposit back, or if you're the landlord and you need to keep the security deposit because your tenant, destroyed the property or something like that. That's all dealt with in the justice court. Small motor vehicle accidents, any type of thing.
Right.
Your neighbor's tree falls into your yard and
People
he
will
doesn't
say
want
to
to
me,
fix it.
people say, well, I'm never going to be in court, so it doesn't matter. I'm like, oh, you're going to end up being in court because divorces, adoptions, traffic
Right.
tickets, a lot of that goes through the court.
Absolutely. And so Department 6, so in our justice court system, in the justice court, the cases that each department handles can change every year or two, just depending on the judges that are there and case reassignments. Currently, Justice Court Department 6 is a civil law department. So we're handling all of the breaches of contracts and debt collection and all of those types of things. We currently have, I think, 2 or 3 departments in justice court out of the 15 that are designated as civil. And so we handle all of those cases for money, which is actually about 60% of the entire caseload for the justice court. So it's obviously incredibly important. All of the judicial races are important. But that's kind of, I actually love this opportunity to give any sort of education, because that's what I spent a lot of time as on the campaign trail doing, is talking about this, because I think it is important that people understand and know what we do.
Right. So Lori, did you want to ask any questions? And then I'll see if Anna wants to come on.
She actually answered it. I was going to ask you, what was Department 6?
Right.
What jurisdiction did you maintain? So
yeah, so it is the civil law department. It can change potentially in the future. But right now that's what it is. That's what it's been for the last 6 years.
Thank you very
much. Anna, are you able to come on and chat and talk about the district court?
Yeah, I'm have to be in an event at 9:30, so I have like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
First of all, I want to record your introduction and replay it for people, because I'm recording. You gave so much good information that frankly I rarely have time to give people, because you're given 2 minutes or 30 seconds sometimes to introduce yourself. Jessica and I, if it hasn't been made really clear, are not running against each other. I'm running in a countywide race in district court. District court affects our life in so many ways, and not even because you're appearing in district court, because your friend or your family member, your neighbor probably is appearing in district court for some reason. So this court affects your life in so many ways that we don't even realize. And I think that's true of all courts too. So I really think it's very important that we keep this a democratic process where the people get to elect the judges. I understand that there's some challenges with it, but whenever I hear people suggest that we make this process less democratic, I cringe. And your introduction really touched on a lot of the reasons why we shouldn't make it less democratic, why we need voters to vote. But we do have an issue with getting information out. My race is countywide, so meeting people that are voting for me, I'm going to be lucky. Just a second, honey. I'm sorry, my daughter is in the car with me. I'm going to be lucky if I can meet probably 10,000 people of the 300,000 plus that are going to be voting or that hopefully will vote for me. Because I think in total, I'm going to need over 300,000 votes to win this race. And too often these races are decided by money. and other factors that frankly have nothing to do with experience and background. I picked this race and this department specifically because I am the most experienced candidate in this race in this court. We really need candidates that are experienced in the court in which they're running because it makes a very big difference, okay? If you haven't practiced in the court in which you're running, you don't know the rules in that court, you don't know the practices in that court, and sometimes you don't even know how much the rulings in that court affect us all. In our society, in our community, in our families, in our groups, in our activities that we do. But you really see that firsthand when you practice in the court, when you represent people in the court, especially when you represent individuals. But it's good to have an array of experience too. I'm the only one in this race that's represented everything from large corporations all the way down to individuals, and even children in this specific court, which is why I'm running for this race. There are going to be, I believe, 4 district court races on every ballot in Clark County, and mine, Department 11, is one of them. So I'm the only Albertson on the ballot, just like the grocery store, but no relationship. So it's very easy to find my name, hopefully. But I do encourage, like you said, people to reach out to me. Ask me the questions that are important to you. If I can't answer them, I will still tell you something about me that will hopefully give you some idea about my background and experience and community involvement, so that you can feel comfortable giving me your vote, and so that you know who you're voting for, because it is really important that the voters know who we are, what we've done with our careers, what we've chosen to do, what kind of community activities we're involved in, because as you said, it's a nonpartisan race. So, and frankly, Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian, whatever your partisan affiliation is, a lot of times when you're sitting on the bench, your partisan affiliation, well, actually almost always, your partisan affiliation doesn't affect your rulings. What it is, do you know the law? Do you know the law that applies in this case? Do you know how to apply it? Do you know what the community effect is going to be when you apply that law? And is that the intention of the legislature when they put those laws into effect? So the more somebody's practiced in the court, usually the better idea they have of all of that. So
well, and
thank you
that
so much
brings
for
up
having me.
well, thank you. I mean, that
If I
brings
jet
up
off,
no, I understand.
if I
You're
jet
in
off,
between.
it's not because I don't want to participate.
Right.
I'll
No,
watch
yeah,
the
we know.
recording. But thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Anna. But I mean, that brings up something that Jessica said, that I think sometimes people assume that you have to have certain qualifications to be able to run for a court. Like Anna said, that you have experience in that court or you have a background in that court. And so, I mean, I've even thought maybe we should put that in, that you should have some experience in the court before you're able to run. So there's lots of little things that we could do to make the election process better, or even just making sure that folks know it's not a really high bar for being able to run for a seat on the court. And so that might be something we could talk about doing.
It's essentially the requirement for different courts is a number of minimum years in practice, but there's no specification. It has to be in practice in that specific court, which is where you get kind of hangups, and where if people are asking the right questions and they can, unfortunately, some of the candidates that don't have appropriate experience have become very clever with their answers. And I've heard things like this when someone's asked, well, how many trials have you done? I've heard somebody who doesn't have any trial experience say, well, I've participated in more than 100 trials. Well, participating could mean anything from the legal perspective to sitting in the back watching and commenting every once in a while with your boss, to sitting in first chair, trial counsel. And what somebody means when a layperson asks you that question is they want to know, how many times were you sitting in that first chair trial counsel seat and all the decisions were up to you and all the pressure was on you, and when things went poorly, you were the one who had to explain it to your client. That's really what the person's asking. And unfortunately, unless the person asks, how many times were you first chair trial counsel in a trial in this court, they're not going to get the answer that they're actually they're not going to get the clear answer. But there are hopefully ways around that. And as we, like you said, education and information.
But I mean, so what do you think about that, Jessica? I mean, if we're looking at maybe ways to tweak the current process that we have now, there's some assumptions that I think voters have that there's certain qualifications a person has to have run for a particular court, but that's not the case. I mean, there's a possibility we could add some qualifications in.
Yeah, so the qualifications to run for judge are set by statute. And so in my race, it's that you have to have been a licensed attorney for 5 years and pay $100 filing fee to run for office. That's it. For Anna's race, I believe the qualification is 10 years. You have to be licensed for 10 years. And not all of that has to be here in Nevada. I think you have to have been here for the last 2 years or something.
Right, right.
That's not an issue in my race because I've been here for 12, I've been licensed here and practicing for 12 years. So that I haven't looked into that. And so any changes to those qualifications would have to come from the state legislature. And one of the things that you brought up in your presentation is obviously as judicial candidates, we have a second set of ethical obligations that we have to abide by as judicial candidates and as judges. And so there's all of the campaign things that we must abide by to start with. And we have our attorney ethics and obligations we have to abide by, but there's another whole set of judicial ethics. And one of those judicial ethics says that we are not allowed to take a stance, certainly a public stance, on any issue that might become before us or could indicate our, our personal feelings about things. And so if you wish to change the qualifications for judges, that certainly goes to your assembly person and your Senate person.
But that would be easier to do because right now, if we said that we don't like electing judges, we want to go to appointment system, that's a constitutional amendment.
Correct.
So that's a 5-year process. But if we voters said, no, I would like my judges to have at least a little experience in the court, that they're running for, that would be something I could say, okay, let's go to our legislature, talk to our lawmakers, because that's something that we could do just through a regular legislative process.
Correct. Yes, exactly. And being an attorney, my brain is automatically trained to see all of the problems that would come up with that. And so I think that it could be done, and I think that it could be done effectively. I do think that it'll take a little bit of work to strike that right balance to make sure that we're not putting up artificial barriers to having qualified candidates run.
Right.
Because I think that that's important.
Right.
And so,
but then what I would say is, okay, if we don't want to put up barriers to people like women, for instance, that's one of the ways you would keep women or people who are from minority groups out. Then I would say, okay, all those of us who are doing candidate forums and voter guides need to be sure that we explained when we get to the judicial races, put what the qualifications actually are from statute. To say this is the statute that they have to qualify for to be able to run.
Right. And if you're doing a voter guide and you're making any sort of recommendation, or if you've done some interviews and are just providing additional education to the public, say why you chose that person, why you were recommending them over the other person. Because, and I appreciate anybody who's willing to spend the time to both educate themselves and help educate others about the judicial candidates, because it's not an easy task. But there have been some people who are like, oh, well, I know this person and that's why they're going to get my recommendation. And I'm like, okay, well, without even talking to the other person in the race.
Right.
So things like that. So even if you're not going to make a recommendation, if you can say, hey, look, I did the research. I talked to this person. Here's what Jessica had to say. Here's what her opponent had to say. And I talked to Anna and here's what she had to say. And this is her background. And if you compile all of that information even, and letting voters know that way, but again, it's not an easy task, and it is a time intensive commitment. And so again, I appreciate anybody who's willing to do that.
So what I did, because in 2020, so 2 years ago, when we had like 900 people running for judge, because it was just overwhelming, I just asked all of the judicial candidates to do a little, 5-minute video. And then I put it up on my YouTube channel and did a video voter guide, because I kept telling people, go out and talk to the candidates. You're like, there are just so many. At least with a 3 to 5 minute video, people could get kind of a little bit of a feel for the candidate and see them and hear them, which is really important.
And I am a firm believer. I am a firm believer in if you talk to somebody, you get a pretty good impression of their person. And you may not have, you know, whether they're going to make all of the best decisions or something like that, but you certainly do get an impression of their temperament. And it's, you know, if you happen to end up in the court system, would this be somebody you want making life-changing decisions for you? I think you get a pretty good indication of that. And I think probably one of the most important questions people can ask is, why are you running?
Yes.
Why are you running? Is it, you know, is it because I actually heard a candidate answer that he was running, or that they were running because they were just kind of tired of practicing law. And I'm like, well, that's not a great reason to become a judge, because a judge is a hard work and it's very important and mentally taxing and emotionally taxing.
But that's why I tell people, go talk to them, because you're not going to see that on their website, but you'll hear it.
Right. And so having candidates answer that question, because I think that tells you a lot. Do they have a good reason? Are they wanting to maintain the status quo? Do they want to change the status quo? Is this a prestige or a power thing? Is this an ego thing? Or are they really trying to help the community?
Right.
Do they see a problem and are trying to fix it?
Well, speaking of that, so Camilla Bywaters is a leader in many communities, but especially the education community. Camilla, are you able to come on and did you want to ask any questions or talk about judicial races?
Well, yeah, sure. I love exactly what Jessica was saying about, you know, asking questions to kind of get to know who candidates are. And I know that Tracy and I, when we try to explain why we like someone, I think that is very helpful. We like this person because of this. I think, and I love the question on why are you running? I am kind of, you know, I don't think I've met anyone who's like, you know, we have the news, or we have these people with some of these ideologies that are like on a whole different planet. I'm still kind of skeptical if these individuals who really are not necessarily good people are honest about who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I haven't really, you know, I know just the past Shepherd's Breakfast, I know there were some statements that were made by some of the judges that kind of took people aback. But I'm still looking to see the individuals who really shouldn't be in office, how they are approaching interviews and if they're being honest.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't really seen that yet, and I really would like to. You know,
right.
And I know one question that Brian Harris asked in his interviews is, who won the election? Was it Joe Biden or Donald Trump? And I still haven't seen anyone say Donald Trump. And for me, I'm waiting for that person who says that, because in my mind, it's like, well, why would you say Donald Trump when you're in front of people who are trying to see if you're a good candidate? And I don't even think I'm making sense. I could be just blabbing right now, but do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
no, yeah, exactly.
Are people really like just saying the dumbness of situations in interviews?
Mm-hmm.
And I just haven't experienced that yet, to see someone say, "Oh, Donald Trump," and then we're like, "Okay, well, no, you're definitely not the person for us."
Right.
But I do believe in, you know, having those deep conversations, because you can start to just pinpoint a little bit of how people are thinking and ideologies.
Right. I mean, and before you came on, we were talking about, you know, why do we elect judges? And it was a progressive reform from 100 years ago that they wanted the community to ask those questions and to be able to do evaluations. But the other thing the progressives did is they did the initiative, the referendum, and the recall, because they, you know, they heard from voters that, okay, I'm looking for that honest candidate. I thought I found an honest candidate. I voted and got that person elected, and now they're doing the complete opposite. With judges, they're in for 6 years. I mean, that's quite a long time period, but we do have the recall ability in this state if someone is just wildly out of bounds when they get elected. And so there is a way to make sure that, you know, somebody can't go completely off the rails. But that's, I mean, I guess that's just the problem when we elect for any position. People can lie.
And I will pipe up on that. And so, and I don't think, you know, we have any, like, I don't think we have any like wildly crazy candidates for judges. We don't tend to get those. I mean, we have had a couple people in the past, but that started actually out with an appointment process. But so I don't think is such an issue here. And I think it's incredibly difficult to get judges recalled. There's been a couple efforts in the past and they weren't successful.
Yeah.
what we see in as a practicing attorney, what we see is judges that are unprepared, are late consistently, are just not doing their job. And so I'm going to answer the question that I tell everybody to ask is, why are you running? And so the reason that I'm running is I did a trial in this department, in Department 6 in Justice Court. It was 3 hours, wasn't a super complicated case. Most cases in Justice Court aren't super complicated, but they're important. And the judge tells us she'll get us an answer shortly. Shortly turned out to be 6 months. 6 months for the judge to make a decision.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
Exactly. And I had heard rumors about this particular judge, just not being present in the courthouse very often and things like that. And so I believe that we are called upon, that if we see a problem in the system and we are able to be a part of the solution, to step up and try to be a part of that solution. And so that's why I'm running, because I think that we need judges that are willing to put in the work, not viewing this as a step to retirement or as a step back from the practice or something like that, but really put in the work and realize that we are public servants.
I've actually heard that what you just said is your reason from a lot of people running. And I hear things like, I go into this court and the judge hasn't read the briefings. So doesn't even know what both sides have already said. And we have to repeat ourselves and it takes too much time. But I think voters need to hear things like that to understand that that's actually what's motivating you.
Right. And right. And that, I think that message resounds with a lot of people because they've all experienced it. And so that's what we see as practicing attorneys. That's not that's not a basis to recall that judge.
Right.
That's not going to get it over the line. And so to Camila's point that, we're waiting to see if some of these people are honest. It's a little trickier with judges because, again, we are trained to argue both sides and to persuasively make our point and convince you one way or the other. We're not supposed to lie, and I'm a firm believer in that. And so without lying, we can make that argument and be very persuasive with that, because that's what
Right.
we're trained to do.
Right.
And so it may be a little bit difficult. I don't think candidates are lying. They just may not be being fully truthful and transparent, which makes it a little harder to judge candidates. And I think that
Right.
the easiest way is, again, talking to them, meeting them, even watching an interview like this. A lot of people, I think, can get some good information and say, okay, like, this person is good, this person gets it, things like that.
Well,
again,
I found that candidates that don't do the civics education part, that aren't willing to sit and have a conversation, kind of explaining what the court they're running for is and how it works, and be patient and take the time to do that. If a candidate doesn't do that, then I don't trust that candidate as much.
Right. Well, because again, they're not willing to put in the time and in the energy and the effort to actually earn the vote.
Right.
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 And judicial elections, again, are difficult because we don't have parties backing us, right? So because we're not allowed to. And so we don't have all of the funding that's behind either of the state parties. But we cover huge numbers of people. I think the most recent numbers I pulled, I think my name's going to be on some like 900,000 ballots, give or take. And I can't possibly meet that many people, right? Like it's impossible. And so traditionally in judicial races, it's, you do a couple of these, the big events, and you go here and you go there. And then about a month before the election, you throw your face and your name up on some billboards and you'll see the road signs all around. And, hopefully you got some name recognition. I will say, I think the set of candidates that's out there now, I think some of us are trying to, we're doing those same things. You'll see my face all over billboards and road signs around town.
It's what you have to do. Right.
Because I have to, but I don't want to just do that. And so I am going out to as many events as possible, 4, 5, 6 every day, to try to meet different people, to, again, not just get the vote because you saw my name or, you saw my face or something like that, but because you and I had a conversation, or I had a conversation with somebody that, and they said, and I earned their vote, and then they're willing to to pass on the good word. Because I think that that's important.
It is.
Don't get me wrong. I'll take the name recognition votes too, but
I think the other
would like
thing that I hear from voters who take the time, they do the research, they show up, they listen, and they'll say, okay, that person talked a lot about community service and how they wanted to be engaged, and then they got elected and I didn't see them ever again. And so I do hear a lot of that. And so I'm really encouraging candidates. It's a super busy job, but just find one of the community service things that you really enjoy doing and try to keep doing that as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. I hear that a lot as well. And here's what I tell organizations, and because I know all of the candidates, and it's true with judicial candidates and everybody else, right? Like we make campaign promises and a lot of people don't follow through with those. You can, and you won't know until that person's elected and you see if they follow through with their word, unfortunately. And so I know that I can't keep up this pace that I'm going forever. It feels like I'm working 3 full-time jobs right now. So I can't possibly keep up that pace. However, it costs me nothing to, you and I met at the Shepherd's Breakfast the other day. It costs me nothing to show up to that. I can't, maybe not every month because, I have a job to do, but if I show up every once a quarter, and make sure I'm still engaging in the community, because I can't serve the community if I'm not part of the community. Right. And so if I can go once a quarter and go to a different event once a quarter, every month I'm doing something instead of doing all of them every month. Once a month, do a different one.
But I go to enough Shepherd's Breakfast, and I'm a white person sitting in there, and I even cringe when candidates say, oh, I haven't been here for 4 years, or it was 6 years ago and I need your vote again. I'm like, oh, that's terrible. Don't do that.
Also, P.S. it's one of the best breakfasts around. They're just missing out on some good food.
I mean, Shepherd's Breakfast is a place to be, but like you said, even if you're going a couple of times a year or just, checking back in, it's just terrible when it's like, oh, I care so little about you. I just don't want to only show up every 4 years and ask for your vote.
Right. It's patronizing and disingenuous and all of that.
Right. And I'm the white person at the table going, whoa, that's really offensive. And even I'm offended,
Right.
And it can be hurtful.
Well, it is. And especially when you were here 4 years ago, we're like, oh yeah, I'll be back. I'm not just going to wait till election cycle. And then you wait till election cycle.
Off you go. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then I think people get jaded and it's like, well, she said this, she didn't do it. So why am I voting? And then I cringe. It's like, no, we have to keep you engaged.
Right. Well, and again, then that's on the candidates responsibility as well, right? Like don't make promises you can't keep. That's just in general, like just a life goal you should have. Don't make promises you can't keep,
people understand that. Yeah.
And then just follow through. Like it's really not hard, and we have an obligation to do that.
Exactly.
And even as to the candidates, look at it from a purely selfish perspective. If you continue to be engaged for the non-election years, your election year gets way easier.
Exactly. Because we are like, oh, hey, Jessica, how are you doing? Right. As opposed to where have you been?
Right. Exactly. Like, who are you?
Right. So Lori and Camilla, before we wrap up, did you want to ask any more questions or, bring up any more topics? Because we're a small group, we can have more discussion. Lori?
No, not right now, but thank you for explaining quite a lot. Thank you for taking the time. It goes a long way, as you said.
Excellent. Camilla, anything else you wanted to chat about?
Yeah, so just really quick, I know you've explained this before, Jessica, but what types of cases would you be responsible for in your court?
Yeah, so I think we might have talked about that before you came in, but just a reiteration, because again, unless you practice in these courts, it's all very confusing. So Justice Court overall handles all criminal cases at the start, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. The misdemeanors will continue to be handled in Justice Court all the way through. Felonies, you'll have your first appearances, and then if it's the right case, it'll go up to our district court. It also handles all traffic tickets, all evictions, and then the civil departments handle cases for money, people suing other people for money up to $15,000. And so a lot of people think about it as small claims. Small claims is a kind of a little separate court that handles cases up to $10,000 if you choose to file in small claims, but justice court handles anything from 0 to 15,000.
Thank
And
you.
you know-
I'm sorry that you repeated that.
No, I don't
it's
apologize.
important. It's important. But I mean, people, Camilla, I was saying before you came on, so many people tell me, oh, I'm never going to be in court. I don't care about judges. I'm not going to be in court. Oh, well, guess what? We just had these waves of evictions. And guess who? Everybody's in court now.
And what happens is after those evictions, when you move into a place, you pay your security deposit. And we have very specific laws in place about what the landlord can do with that security deposit and how it must be returned, and certain timelines that they have to tell you. If they're not going to return it, here's why they're not returning it. And you have an obligation to respond to that. And then they have to go to court. And so that's a ton of the work that we do in justice court, is dealing with those return of security deposits. Or, for example, the case that caused me to end up running for this seat, it was, I actually represented the landlord, and the tenant had caused damage to the home far exceeding the security deposit. So he was suing the tenant to get his house repaired. So that's a lot of what we do. And especially with the price of homeownership right now, and that's a whole different discussion that we don't need to have. We have a ton of renters in our community, and knowing your rights is important, but to think that you may never have to come into court, that's probably one of the most popular reasons you're going to end up in court. And it's important to know that you have a judge who's familiar with the law, has practiced in that area. And that's one of the things that Anna said, having actually worked on these types of cases as an attorney, to know both sides of it and not just learning the law on the bench. That's not what we want. So I think that that's really important.
Okay, this has been awesome. Sometimes because I know there's a lot of events going on, but I'm like, I got to do the Zoom where I explain why we elect judges, because I'm getting that question a lot. But this has been really nice to be able to have kind of like an academic back and forth of why do we do this and what do you do about that, so that people who didn't join us today can watch this and go, oh, okay, now I know why I need to ask why you're running for that court or which court you're running for, because I didn't realize that was a thing.
And this has been incredible. If you don't mind, I'm going to share this out through my campaign and my social media, because
send it.
Yeah, thank you so much, because I try to answer a lot of these questions. And actually what you'll see is if you're at an event where there's a lot of judicial candidates, we all kind of, because we only get 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Right. And so we'll all kind of, without an agreement to do so, I'll kind of take a piece of that education, and I'll, right. One of us will start like, hey, who's in Las Vegas? Okay, we're on your ballot. And then the next candidate will talk about, this is what justice court does, and this is what justice court does. So having all of this information in one setting, and again, if I can put it out to my market and my people, and that can get shared out so we can educate people, because I think it's really, really important. And this has been a fantastic Zoom. So I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me be here.
So soon the judicial candidates are getting an email from me saying participate in the video voter guide. But then probably middle of September, I'll probably do like a Friday night forum or something where I know there's not a lot of other events going on. Have all the judicial candidates come on and give everybody enough time to do an explanation of which court are you running for, why are you qualified, and record it, so that we've got, everybody running for all the different courts, so that people can understand what the different courts do, but also give the judicial candidates more than the 30 seconds you get in other events.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was funny 2 years ago, because we had so many people running, that's what I did, is I did Friday night forums for like 6 weeks. And we went all the way up until the Friday before election day. And I said, okay, we're going to mix things up. I want each of you to pick somebody else on the Zoom and give me their campaign speech. It was hilarious because they could do it.
Yeah, 100%. I can give most of the candidates campaign speeches, and it's funny because now if people have been to enough events that I've been at, people can give mine, and I will actually watch the audience. I have a tagline, of course,
right?
And I will actually have the audience, like, they'll say it back to me as I'm saying it. So.
Right. But it was good because I noticed when people, you know, were watching the recordings, when people watched that one, they were like, it was really nice to see people that are running to be judges, which I consider to be very stern and not having a lot of humor, laughing and interacting with each other. Even people running against each other going, oh, I can do so-and-so's, and, you know, and she has a dog. And it was really, really a lot of fun. But it gave them, and they were also tense right before the election, just to kind of relax a little bit. So
Yeah.
we'll probably do something like that again.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Please,
Okay.
please keep me
All
included.
right. Well, I know you've probably got events because, like I say, I've just been watching. I don't know how you guys do it. There's so many that are going on right now, but I appreciate you spending some time with us and helping me to kind of explain things.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll sign off, and you will get the link, the recording. Share it as much as you want. I'm going to send it out to all the judicial candidates, say, please send this so people know why we do this kind of crazy electing thing.
Wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Good to see you, Camila.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Camila. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All righty.